I'm on my hands and knees scrubbing the marble floor in the grand foyer when my cousin Victoria walks past me with her friends, their designer heels clicking inches from my fingers. She doesn't even glance down. Just laughs at something one of them says and calls over her shoulder, "When you're done with that, the guest bathroom needs cleaning." My mother's book club is coming at 4. One of her friends, a blonde woman in a Chanel suit, stops and looks down at me. I can see her shoes, white leather stilettos that probably cost more than I've made in the past month. Her voice drops to a whisper that isn't really a whisper. "Is that the help?" Victoria pauses mid-step, turns back, and looks at me like she's seeing me for the first time today. "Oh, that's just my cousin Katie. She lives here." "She lives here?" The blonde woman's perfectly shaped eyebrows rise. "Like, with a family?" "Sort of." Victoria laughs, a sound like ice clinking in expensive champagne. "She needed a place to stay after her divorce and job loss. We're letting her stay in exchange for helping around the house. It works out for everyone." "Helping around the house," the blonde repeats, and the way she says it makes it sound like something dirty. Something shameful. "We're very close with family," Victoria says, and her friends nod approvingly, like she's some kind of saint for taking in her poor, pathetic cousin. They continue toward the front door, their laughter floating behind them like perfume. I can hear them still talking about me as they reach their cars, their voices carrying through the open windows. "She's like a live-in maid except you don't have to pay her." I know. It's genius, honestly. Does she do it all? Cooking and everything? Everything. My mother leaves her lists. She's incredibly organized about it. "You're so lucky." They drive away, tires crunching on the gravel driveway, and I sit back on my heels, my knees aching from the cold marble, my hands raw from the bleach solution Diane insists I use on the floors every Tuesday and Friday. I look around this massive foyer with its double-height ceiling and its crystal chandelier that was original to the house and its oil paintings on the walls that my grandmother collected over decades. And I almost smile. Because what they don't know, what none of them know, is that this house was never theirs to begin with. I never thought I'd be telling this story. Not because I'm ashamed of what happened, though there were plenty of moments that made me want to disappear. Not because I want revenge, though I won't pretend that what came later didn't feel like the most satisfying justice I've ever experienced. But because for 18 months, I lived in a nightmare dressed up as family generosity, and I spent every single day of that nightmare convincing myself I deserved it. That I was lucky. That I should be grateful. That scrubbing floors in my own house was a privilege. I was wrong about all of it. So wrong that sometimes, lying in bed at night in my small room on the 3rd floor, I wonder how I lasted as long as I did without breaking. My name is Catherine Rose Morrison. Katie to the people who actually care about me, which is a shorter list than I'd like. I'm 34 years old, and 18 months ago, my entire life disintegrated in the span of 3 weeks. 3 weeks. That's all it took for everything I'd built to crumble. My husband David served me with divorce papers on a Tuesday. We'd been married for 7 years. 7 years of loving him, supporting his career, putting my own ambitions on hold because he said it made more sense for one of us to focus on the household while the other built their career. I'd believed him. Had been happy, or at least I thought I was happy, playing the supporting role in our shared life. But he'd been unhappy for years. At least that's what he said when I asked why. Years of being unhappy, years of feeling trapped, years of wanting more. And the more turned out to be a 26-year-old marketing assistant named Brittany with Instagram followers and zero personality. He wanted the divorce to be amicable. That was his word. Amicable. He'd keep the house. I'd get half the savings. We'd go our separate ways like civilized adults. I was so stunned by the betrayal that I didn't fight. Didn't argue. Didn't demand my fair share. I just signed what he put in front of me and watched my 7-year marriage dissolve into paperwork. 3 days later, on Friday, my company went bankrupt. I worked as a marketing coordinator for a mid-sized retail chain. Had been there for 4 years. Liked my coworkers. Had built relationships with clients. Was good at my job, not brilliant, but solid and reliable. None of that mattered when the company ran out of money. They laid off the entire staff on a Friday afternoon. Handed us our final paychecks and told us to clear out our desks. HR was there to make sure we didn't steal anything on our way out. I sat in my car in the parking lot and cried for an hour. By Monday, I had nothing. No husband. No job. No savings worth mentioning. My half of the divorce settlement barely covered 2 months of rent on my own apartment. I called everyone I could think of. My parents had retired to Florida and were living in a tiny condo they could barely afford. They couldn't help me financially and didn't have room for me anyway. My friends from before the divorce had all been couple friends who stayed with David. They didn't answer my calls. I was 32 years old and I was about to be homeless. That's when I called Victoria. We'd grown up together. Spent summers at my grandmother Eleanor's house in this very area, playing in the garden, building forts in the attic, having sleepovers in the room I now occupy. We'd been close once. Real close. Like sisters, everyone said. But somewhere around college, we drifted. She married a wealthy investment banker named Richard. I married David for love, because he made me laugh and I thought that was enough. She lived in the massive house that her mother Diane inherited when my grandmother passed away. I lived in a modest townhouse that David kept in the divorce. When I called her that Monday, desperate and ashamed, she didn't hesitate. "Of course you can stay with us," she said warmly, like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Family takes care of family. Stay as long as you need." I cried with relief. Actual tears of gratitude. "Thank you," I kept saying. "Thank you so much. I'll find a job quickly. I won't be a burden." "You could never be a burden, Katie. Come whenever you're ready." I packed 4 suitcases with everything I owned, which wasn't much. Clothes, a few books, my laptop, some personal items. Everything else from my marriage, the furniture and dishes and photos and memories, I left behind. I didn't want them. Couldn't look at them without seeing David's face. I should have known better. Should have seen the trap waiting behind the open door. The first week was fine. Genuinely fine. Victoria and Diane welcomed me with the kind of warmth that makes you believe in family again. They set me up in the guest room on the 3rd floor, a small but comfortable space with a view of the rose garden my grandmother had planted decades ago. The room still had my grandmother's writing desk, a beautiful antique piece with carved legs and a brass lock. "You always loved that desk," Diane said, showing me the room. "Grandmother always said you should have it." I touched the wood, felt a lump in my throat. I remember sitting at it when I was little. Pretending to write important letters. "You can keep it in here," she said. "Make it yours." I was so grateful. So touched by their kindness. Victoria invited me to family dinners every night. Diane asked about my job search, seemed genuinely interested in my progress. Richard, Victoria's husband, was polite but distant, the kind of man who acknowledges your existence with a nod and nothing more. Their son Brandon, 10 years old, was curious about me. "Are you like a living guest?" he asked over pasta one evening. "That's enough, Brandon," Victoria said sharply. "Katie is family. She's staying with us while she gets back on her feet." "Like a guest," Brandon repeated. "Like family," Victoria corrected, and I smiled at her gratefully. But I should have listened more carefully to the undertone. "While she gets back on her feet" implied a temporary condition. A problem to be solved. Not a person to be valued. The second week, things started to shift. Not dramatically. Not all at once. In small ways. Like a tide coming in, you don't notice until you're already underwater. "Katie, since you're home anyway, would you mind throwing a load of laundry in?" Diane asked casually one morning while I was in the kitchen pouring coffee. "Sure," I said. "Whose?" "Everyone's. The hamper in the mudroom is full." Don't mix the whites with colors, please. I did the laundry. It took 3 loads. I folded everything and put it in the appropriate rooms. The next day, Katie, I'm running late for my hair appointment. Could you grab the dry cleaning for Martin's? The ticket is on the counter. I picked up the dry cleaning. 5 suits, 4 blouses, a cashmere coat. The day after that, Katie, we're having people over tonight for cocktails. Would you help me prep the appetizers? I need 3 different types of canapes and maybe a cheese board. I spent 2 hours in the kitchen making appetizers for Diane's friends, none of whom spoke to me when they arrived, who walked past me carrying trays without a thank you, who asked Diane if her new housekeeper came highly recommended. She's my niece, Diane said with a tight smile. Oh, how lovely. Keeping it in the family. Small requests. Reasonable requests, or so I told myself. Diane was letting me stay rent-free. What was a little laundry and dry cleaning and appetizer prep in exchange for a roof over my head? I said yes to all of it. Didn't complain. Didn't push back. Just smiled and did what was asked and told myself it was temporary. By the 3rd week, the requests stopped being requests. Katie, the kitchen is a mess. Clean it up before my book club arrives at 2. I made lunch for Brandon. He needs to be picked up from school at 3:30. The guest bathroom hasn't been scrubbed in weeks. Take care of it before Victoria's dinner party. No please. No thank you. No acknowledgement that I had my own life to manage, my own job search to conduct, my own healing to do. Just orders. I was starting to feel like I was disappearing. Like my personhood was being gradually erased, replaced by a series of functions. I was no longer Katie. I was the dishwasher, the laundry machine, the grocery shopper, the bathroom cleaner. And I was so grateful for the roof over my head that I didn't complain. The turning point, the moment when things shifted from uncomfortable to intolerable, happened on a Saturday afternoon in my 2nd month. I was in the middle of a phone interview for a marketing position. A good position, senior level, at a company I actually respected. I was in my car in the driveway because the house was too noisy for a professional call. Brandon was watching cartoons with the volume at maximum. Richard was on a conference call in his home office. Diane was on the phone with her sister. I was doing well in the interview. The hiring manager was engaged, asking good questions, laughing at my responses. We were 15 minutes into what was shaping up to be a promising conversation. Then Victoria knocked on my car window. I held up one finger, signaling that I was on a call. She knocked again. Harder. Katie. Her voice was muffled through the glass. I need you to pick up Brandon from soccer practice. His coach just called. They're ending early. I pointed at the phone in my hand. Mouthed, I'm on a call. Katie, Brandon can't wait. He's at the field alone. I looked at her through the glass. Her face was tight with irritation. Her arms were crossed. She was not going to leave until I did what she wanted. I covered the phone with my hand. I'm sorry, I said to the hiring manager. I have an emergency. Can we reschedule? We can try, he said, and I could hear the disappointment in his voice. But we're making decisions next week. I understand. I'll call back as soon as I can. By the time I hung up and stepped out of the car, Victoria was already walking toward her own car. Hurry up, she called over her shoulder. He's been waiting 20 minutes. I drove to the soccer field, picked up Brandon, drove him home. He didn't say thank you. Just got out of the car and went inside. When I got back to the house, Diane was in the kitchen, looking annoyed. Did you forget to start the slow cooker? She asked. What? I texted you this morning asking you to put the roast in at noon. It's already 1:30. I was on a job interview. Victoria made me pick up Brandon. You could have set the slow cooker before you left. It takes 30 seconds. The injustice of it hit me like a physical blow. I'd just sacrificed a job interview, a real chance at employment, at escape, and she was complaining about a slow cooker. "You're right," I said, because arguing seemed pointless. "I'm sorry. I started the slow cooker. I made dinner. I cleaned up after dinner. I went to bed at 11 and set my alarm for 6 because Diane wanted me to make pancakes for Brandon before school." I called the hiring manager back the next day. The position had been filled. I sat on the edge of my bed in my small room on the 3rd floor, holding my phone, staring at the ceiling, and I felt something crack inside me. Not break completely. Just crack. A fracture in the wall I'd built between myself and the despair that was always pressing against it. By the end of month 3, I wasn't even pretending to be a guest anymore. I was staff. Unpaid staff. Diane started leaving me lists. Not verbal requests, which I could sometimes deflect or delay. Actual written lists on lined paper, placed on the kitchen counter every morning before I came downstairs. Monday. 6 a.m. breakfast for family. 7:30 a.m. drive Brandon to school. 9 a.m. grocery shopping, list attached. 11 a.m. clean kitchen and living room. 12 p.m. start dinner prep. 2 p.m. pick up Brandon from school. 3 p.m. help Brandon with homework. 4:30 p.m. finish dinner. 6 p.m. serve dinner. 7:30 p.m. clean kitchen after dinner. 8 p.m. laundry, whites today. Every day was like this. Detailed, specific, demanding. I was expected to manage the household from morning to night with barely an hour to myself. And my job search? My applications and interviews and networking and resumes? They happened in the cracks. 20 minutes here while something was in the oven. Half an hour there while Diane was at the spa. Phone interviews taken in my car, hiding in parking lots, whispering into my phone while pretending I was somewhere with privacy. I got close to several positions. Second interviews, third interviews. But something always fell through. The funding disappeared. They went with an internal candidate. The position was put on hold. Once, the hiring manager told me apologetically that they'd heard I was difficult to reach during business hours and had decided to go with a more available candidate. Difficult to reach. Because I was busy scrubbing floors. Each rejection felt like another month trapped in that house. Another month of being invisible. Another month of being the invisible engine that kept everything running. I started documenting the lists. Photographing them on my phone. Not because I had any plan yet, but because something in me wanted proof. Wanted evidence that I was being treated like staff. That I wasn't imagining it. The lists accumulated in my phone like evidence in a case I hadn't decided to build yet. 4 months in, Victoria had a dinner party. 12 guests. The kind of elegant affair that required perfect execution. Diane insisted on helping with the planning, which meant she decided what I would cook and how the table would be set and what wine to serve, and I did all the actual work. I spent 3 days preparing. Shopping, chopping, marinating, setting up. I vacuumed the dining room, polished the silverware, ironed the tablecloths. I cooked a 5-course meal that would have impressed any restaurant critic. The night of the party, Victoria walked through the dining room during setup and inspected my work like a hotel manager checking a room. "The napkins need to be folded differently," she said. "We're doing bishop's hats, not fans." Okay. I refold all 12 napkins. "And the candles are wrong. I told you white, not cream. The cream ones looked better with the flowers. I didn't ask for your opinion." Her voice was flat. Final. "Use the white." I found the white candles and replaced them. "And these centerpieces are too tall. People won't be able to see each other." The florist recommended. "Lower them." I don't care what the florist recommended. I shortened the centerpieces. When the guests arrived, I served drinks and appetizers and then retreated to the kitchen to prepare the main course. Through the swinging door, I could hear the dinner conversation. Diane talking about her charity work. Victoria talking about the house, which she always referred to as our family home. Richard talking about his investments. No one mentioned me. Not once. After dinner, one of the guests, a woman named Patricia, came into the kitchen for more wine and found me washing dishes. "Oh, hello," she said, looking surprised. "Are you?" "I'm Katie. Diane's niece." "Her niece? How wonderful. You did an amazing job with dinner. Everything was delicious." "Thank you. Are you visiting?" "I live here." "How nice. And you help with the cooking?" "I do all the cooking." Something in Patricia's expression shifted. A flicker of recognition. "All of it?" "All of it. And the cleaning and the laundry and the grocery shopping and driving the kid to school." Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, very softly, "You're not the housekeeper, are you?" "No. I'm the family." But I might as well not be." Patricia looked at me with genuine compassion. "Katie, have you considered that this isn't healthy? Every single day." "Then why do you stay?" "Because I have nowhere else to go." She didn't say anything else. Just touched my arm gently and went back to the dinner party with her wine. I finished the dishes and went upstairs to my room and didn't come back down until the guests had left. The next morning, Diane found me in the kitchen and said, "Patricia complimented the dinner. She said it was the best meal she'd had in months." "That's nice." "She also asked about you. Seemed very interested in your situation." I looked up from the coffee I was pouring. "What did you tell her?" "That you're family. Staying with us while you get back on your feet." "Is that what I am? Family?" "Of course you are." "Why would you ask that?" "Because family doesn't leave lists of chores for their relatives to follow. Family doesn't treat their loved ones like staff." Diane's face tightened. "We're giving you a free place to live, Katie. Is it really too much to ask for a little help around the house?" "It's not a little help, Aunt Diane. It's a full-time job. I'm working more hours for you than I ever worked at my actual job. And I don't get paid. I don't get days off. I don't get appreciation. I don't even get a thank you. Most people would be grateful for what we're offering." The guilt hit like a fist. "I am grateful." Then stop complaining and help more with the attitude. I wanted to argue. Wanted to scream. Wanted to point out that gratitude and servitude are not the same thing. But I didn't have anywhere else to go. So I swallowed my pride and I made breakfast and I drove Brandon to school and I scrubbed the bathroom floor and I did the laundry and I cooked dinner and I cleaned up and I went to bed and I started over the next morning. By month 6, the humiliation had become routine. I barely noticed it anymore. It was like background noise, always there, always pressing, but so constant that I'd stopped registering it consciously. I scrubbed the marble foyer on my hands and knees while Victoria's friends walked past me. I cooked elaborate meals that were consumed without a single compliment. I folded laundry that would be refolded by Diane because I'd done it wrong. I organized cupboards that would be reorganized because I'd put the wrong thing on the wrong shelf. And through it all, I smiled. Because that's what grateful people do. They smile through the pain and pretend it doesn't hurt and keep going because they have no choice. But something was happening in the margins of my awareness. Small things that didn't add up. Hints of something I couldn't quite grasp. The first clue was the locked study. My grandmother's study was on the second floor, down the hall from Diane's bedroom. It had always been locked. Diane kept the key on a ring that she wore on her wrist, like a bracelet. She went in there sometimes, alone, and I'd hear her talking on the phone through the door. Her voice was always low, always careful, like she was discussing something sensitive. One afternoon, I was carrying laundry past the study and the door was open. Just a crack, not enough to see inside, but enough to hear Diane's voice. "I've been trying to sort through the paperwork," she was saying. "The trust fund documents are a mess. There are beneficiary questions that don't make sense. A pause. No, I'm not asking for legal advice. I'm asking for help understanding my own mother's estate. Another pause. Well, the lawyer keeps sending letters addressed to Katie, which is odd. Why would they be sending letters to Katie? I froze outside the door, laundry basket in my arms. Can you find out for me? I don't want to involve anyone else in this. She hung up. I hurried down the hallway before she could catch me listening. My heart was pounding, not from exertion but from confusion. Letters addressed to me. From my grandmother's lawyer. About an estate. I'd never received any letters from my grandmother's lawyer. I'd never been contacted about any inheritance. Diane had handled everything after my grandmother's death. I'd assumed there was nothing for me. Just memories. But if there were letters, if the lawyer was trying to contact me, what did that mean? I filed the information away in the back of my mind. It was unsettling, but I didn't have the energy to investigate while I was also managing a household full of people who treated me like I was furniture. The second clue came a month later, in the form of a phone call. I was in the kitchen, cooking dinner as usual, when Diane's phone rang on the counter. She was upstairs. The phone kept ringing, which was unusual because Diane never missed a call. After the fifth ring, the caller left a voicemail. I shouldn't have listened. It wasn't my business. But something made me pick up the phone and look at the screen. The voicemail was from a law firm. Morrison and Associates. My grandmother's law firm. The same firm that had handled her estate. I put the phone down carefully, like it might burn me. When Diane came downstairs, I told her she'd missed a call. She looked at the screen, and her face went pale. Just bill collectors, she said quickly. I'll handle it. She didn't handle it. She took the phone into the study and closed the door. I heard her talking in that low, careful voice for over an hour. The third clue came when I started using the desk in my room. I'd been avoiding my grandmother's writing desk because it made me emotional. It reminded me of her. Of summers spent in this house, sitting at that desk, pretending to write letters to imaginary friends. But my laptop was dying and I needed a flat surface to work on job applications. So I pulled out the chair and sat down at the desk for the first time since moving in. That's when I noticed the drawer. The shallow one on the left side. I'd always known it was shallow, but now, with adult eyes, I realized it was shallower than it should be. The drawer front was the same size as the others, but the interior space was only about half the depth. I pulled the drawer all the way out. There was a false bottom. My heart started pounding. I pressed on the false panel and it popped open, revealing a compartment underneath. Inside was a manila envelope, yellowed with age, sealed with tape that had dried and cracked years ago. My grandmother's handwriting on the front. Blue ink, the elegant cursive she'd always prided herself on. For words that would change my life. For Catherine Rose. Her alone. I sat at the desk in my small room on the third floor of my grandmother's house and opened the envelope with trembling hands. Inside were documents. Legal documents. A will. Property deeds. Bank statements. Letters. I started reading and the world tilted. My grandmother had owned the house outright. That much I knew. What I didn't know was that she'd left it to me. Not to Diane, her daughter. Not to Victoria, her granddaughter. To me. The will was dated 3 months before she died. It was signed, witnessed, and notarized by her lawyer, the same firm that had left the voicemail on Diane's phone. And it explicitly stated that the house at 1447 Elmcrest Drive, all its contents, and the substantial trust fund that was attached to it were to be given to my granddaughter Catherine Rose Morrison, who has always understood the value of kindness, hard work, and humility. There was a letter too. Handwritten on my grandmother's personal stationery, the cream-colored paper with her initials embossed at the top. My dearest Katie, if you're reading this, I hope it comes as a pleasant surprise rather than a necessity. I'm leaving you the house because I know you'll love it the way I always have. Not for its value or prestige, but for what it truly represents. Home. Safety. Family. Your mother and I had our differences over the years, and I fear Diane has inherited more of her father's materialistic nature than I'd hoped. She sees the house as an asset to be managed. You'll see it as a home to be loved. Trust yourself. Be strong. And know that you were always my favorite, though I wasn't supposed to say such things. All my love, Grandmother Eleanor. I read it 3 times, tears streaming down my face, soaking into the yellow paper. Then I looked at the date on the will. 10 years ago. Before my grandmother died. Before Diane supposedly inherited everything. Before I ended up homeless and desperate and scrubbing floors in the home that was legally mine. How had this happened? How had Diane ended up living in the house for 10 years if the will left it to me? I dug deeper in the envelope and found another document. A letter typed on official law firm letterhead. Dear Ms. Morrison, we are writing to formally inform you of your inheritance as outlined in the last will and testament of Eleanor Rose Morrison, dated March 15, 2012. As the primary beneficiary named in the will, you are entitled to full ownership of the property at 1447 Elmcrest Drive and the entirety of the Morrison Family Trust, valued at approximately $1.2 million. Please contact our office at your earliest convenience to arrange the formal transfer of property and assets. Multiple attempts have been made to reach you at the address on file. This letter represents our final attempt before we are forced to proceed with alternate legal channels. The letter was dated 9 years ago. Sent to my old apartment, the one I'd lived in during my first year of marriage. I'd moved 3 times since then. I'd never received it. And Diane? She'd lived in this house ever since my grandmother died. She'd told everyone she inherited it. She'd redecorated, updated, hosted parties, treated the house like her personal estate. She'd known. She must have known. I looked at the envelope again. It had been in my grandmother's desk. The desk that Diane had given me when I moved in, saying, "You always loved this old thing. You should have it." Had she known the envelope was inside? Had she been hiding it? Or had she genuinely forgotten? I didn't believe in coincidences anymore. Not after what I'd been through. I took pictures of every document with my phone. Photographed the will, the letters, the property deed, the bank statements. Then I put everything back in the envelope and hid it deep in my closet, under the winter sweaters I'd brought but never wore. I needed to think. To plan. To figure out what this meant. That night at dinner, Victoria was talking about redecorating the living room. "I've always hated the wallpaper in there," she said, spearing her salad. "I think we should do a light gray with white molding. Really modernize it." My grandmother's wallpaper. The one she'd hand-picked from a boutique in London. In my house. "What do you think, Katie?" Diane asked. I realized everyone was looking at me, waiting for my opinion like it was a formality. "It's your house," I said carefully, and the words tasted like poison. "Whatever you prefer." Diane smiled. "That's sweet of you. You're always so agreeable." Victoria laughed. "That's because she knows she's lucky to be here." I nodded. Smiled. Kept my face neutral while inside, something was breaking and reassembling itself into something harder. Something sharper. "Very lucky," I said. After dinner, I went upstairs and closed my door and sat in the dark. My grandmother had left me everything. The house. The money. The trust. And somehow, through a combination of lost mail, missing contact information, and what I was now beginning to suspect was deliberate concealment, I'd been living here for 6 months as an unpaid servant while Diane enjoyed my inheritance. Not just enjoyed it. Weaponized it. Used the house as leverage to control me. Made me grateful for the privilege of being her maid. The anger came in waves. First, a slow burn. Then a blaze. Then something white-hot and crystalline that settled into my bones like ice. I wasn't just a guest being treated poorly. I was the owner being exploited. And I needed to do something about it. The next morning, while everyone was out of the house, I called the law firm from the letter. It took some digging. 9 years is a long time, and law firms reorganize, merge, change names. But I finally reached someone who could help. Morrison Estate? The paralegal sounded surprised. That case has been in limbo for almost a decade. The beneficiary never responded to our correspondence. I'm the beneficiary. Catherine Morrison. I never received your letters. Oh. A pause. The sound of typing. Oh my. Ms. Morrison, we've been attempting to reach you for 9 years. I moved multiple times. I never updated my address because I didn't know I needed to. Well, this is quite a situation. Can you come to our office? We'll need to verify your identity and discuss next steps. I'll be there this afternoon. I went to the law firm that same day, during what I told Diane was a job interview. The irony wasn't lost on me. The attorney, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and reading glasses perched on her nose, reviewed all my documents with increasingly raised eyebrows. This is all legitimate, she said finally, her voice careful. The will is valid. The trust is valid. The house has been legally yours for 10 years. But my aunt has been living there. Paying property taxes. Maintaining it. With what money? I don't know. Margaret typed something into her computer, frowning. According to our records, the property taxes, insurance, and maintenance have been paid from the trust fund. The trust fund that belongs to you. Your aunt has been using your money to maintain your house while living in it. I felt sick. Genuinely nauseous. Did she know? Did she know it was my money? Margaret pulled out a thick file. When we couldn't reach you, we sent correspondence directly to the house. Letters addressed to you, with a note asking that they be returned to sender if undeliverable. The letters were never returned. Someone at that address received mail intended for you and never forwarded it. That's a crime, isn't it? Potentially. Interfering with mail is a federal offense. Though proving intent would be challenging. She could claim she thought you'd abandoned your inheritance. For 9 years? Margaret looked at me over her glasses. People can rationalize anything when money is involved. What do I do now? That depends entirely on what you want, Catherine. You can file a claim with the court to formally transfer the deed to your name. You can demand your aunt vacate the property immediately. You can pursue legal action for the funds she's used from your trust. Or you can negotiate a private settlement. What do you recommend? I recommend protecting yourself first. Filing the claim immediately. Getting the deed transferred before anyone has a chance to challenge it. And then deciding how to handle your aunt. She's been living in my house for 10 years. And you've been living there for 6 months. How has that been? I thought about the lists. The floors. The bathrooms. The laundry. The cooking. The complete and total erasure of my personhood. Not great, I said. Margaret's expression softened. Then let's make sure you get what's yours. The plan was straightforward but required patience. Margaret would file the necessary paperwork with the court to formally establish my ownership. This would take several weeks because of the complications with Diane's residency. In the meantime, I would continue living in the house, documenting everything. The tasks they asked me to do. The way they treated me. The financial records of what they'd spent from the trust. Don't let them know, Margaret advised. Not yet. Let them keep showing their hand. It'll only strengthen your position. So I went back to the house and I cleaned and cooked and smiled and served and scrubbed and folded and drove and organized and planned. But I was watching now. Truly watching. I recorded conversations on my phone. Not every one, just the ones where Diane or Victoria said something particularly dismissive or entitled. I took photos of every list Diane left me. I kept a daily log of every task they assigned, every minute of labor, every moment of being treated like staff. I started looking through the trust fund records Margaret had given me. The money Diane had spent over the past 9 years. Property taxes, yes. Insurance, yes. But also renovations. A new kitchen that cost $40,000. A bathroom remodel that cost $30,000. New furniture. Artwork. Landscape design. Diane had used my inheritance to customize my house to her taste. The rage I'd been containing cracked wider. 3 weeks into this covert operation, Victoria had another dinner party. This time, her book club friends were coming. 20 women, all of them from the same social circle, all of them wealthy and entitled and completely oblivious. I spent 2 days preparing. Shopping for ingredients, cooking elaborate appetizers, cleaning the house until it gleamed. I polished the silver, ironed the tablecloths, arranged fresh flowers from the garden. I even dressed up, put on real clothes instead of my usual cleaning outfit, because part of me wanted them to see me as a person. The evening started well enough. I served drinks and appetizers, moving through the room like a trained professional. Most of the women ignored me, which was actually a relief compared to the usual commentary. But then Victoria decided to play hostess and introduced me to her friends. "This is my cousin Katie," she said, gesturing at me while I was holding a tray of canapés. "She's been staying with us. We're helping her get back on her feet." "Oh, how generous of you," said the blonde woman from the Chanel suit, the one who'd asked if I was the help. "Family takes care of family," Victoria said serenely. "It must be so nice to have that kind of support," another woman said, looking at me with that pitying expression I'd come to know so well. I set down the tray and smiled. "It really is. Though I think I've been the one providing more support than receiving it lately." The room went slightly tense. Victoria's smile tightened. "Now, Katie," she said, her voice carrying that warning tone, "we've talked about this." "Have we?" I looked at her innocently. I don't remember discussing how much free labor I provide in exchange for a room. A few of the women exchanged glances. "Katie," Victoria said, and there was steel under her silk, "would you refresh the cheese plate? It's looking thin." I looked at her. At her perfectly made-up face. At her expensive dress. At the living room of my house, decorated with my grandmother's furniture, paid for with my inheritance. "Certainly," I said, and I went to the kitchen. But something had shifted. In the room. In me. I didn't go back to the party. I stayed in the kitchen, cleaning up, listening to the women laugh and talk about their lives while I scrubbed pots that had been used to prepare food I'd cooked for people who didn't know my name. The next morning, Diane found me in the kitchen and said, "Victoria mentioned you were snippy last night." "Snippy?" "She said you made a comment about providing free labor." In front of her friends. I made an observation. An accurate one. "Katie, you embarrassed her." "I embarrassed her? By telling the truth?" "The truth isn't always appropriate for public consumption." "Then maybe you should stop putting me in public situations where I have to pretend I'm something I'm not." "And what is that, exactly?" I looked at her directly. "A guest." She blinked. "You are a guest." "Am I?" "Guests don't scrub your floors. Guests don't do your laundry. Guests don't cook your meals and drive your child and clean your bathrooms. Guests don't follow your daily chore lists." Diane's face flushed. "Those lists are suggestions, not demands. Every list you've written has specific times and instructions. Clean kitchen by 9 a.m. Whites in laundry by 11 a.m. Dinner prep by noon. Those aren't suggestions, Aunt Diane. Those are work orders. We're giving you a place to live, Katie. The least you can do is help." "I'm not helping. I'm performing labor." "There's a difference." Her eyes narrowed. "If you're so unhappy, you're welcome to leave." And there it was. The thread she'd been holding over my head for 6 months. The implication that without her generosity, I'd be on the street. That I should be grateful for any treatment because the alternative was homelessness. A month ago, that threat would have worked. Would have sent me scrambling to apologize and promise to be better. But I had documents in my closet. Documents that said this house was mine. I think I'll stay, I said quietly. Then stop complaining and be grateful. I will be. And I meant it. I just didn't mean it the way she thought. Over the next few weeks, I watched the household with new eyes. Diane's interactions with me weren't just disrespectful. They were deliberate. Calculated. She'd trained me to be dependent, to feel small, to believe I had no power and no choices. And Victoria was the same way. Every interaction carried the same undertone. You're lucky to be here. Don't forget your place. Don't challenge the hierarchy. I continued documenting. Photographing everything. Recording conversations. Building my case. Margaret called me 4 weeks into the covert operation. It's done, she said, her voice carrying quiet satisfaction. The court has formally recognized your claim. The deed is in your name. The trust has been transferred to your control. You are the legal, undisputed owner of the house at 1447 Elmcrest Drive and all associated assets. The world stopped spinning for a moment. Say that again, I whispered. You own the house, Catherine. Everything in it. The property, the trust fund, all of it. Your grandmother's will has been fully executed. What about my aunt? She has no legal claim to the property. No lease, no rental agreement, no formal arrangement. She's essentially been occupying your property without permission for a decade. You can evict her immediately. I sat in my car in the parking lot of a grocery store, the place where I'd been buying groceries for a household that didn't appreciate me, and I cried. Not sad tears. Not angry tears. Relieved tears. Vindicated tears. The tears of a woman who'd been drowning for months and suddenly discovered she could breathe. I need to talk to her first, I said. Before I do anything legal. Catherine, I advise against confrontation without representation. I don't want confrontation. I want conversation. I've earned that. Margaret was quiet for a moment. All right. But I'm preparing a formal document for you to present. Official notice of ownership. If things go badly, you'll have legal proof that you've notified her. Thank you. Good luck. And Catherine? This is your house. Don't forget that. I chose a Tuesday evening for the conversation. Diane was hosting her book club on Thursday, Victoria had a charity event on Wednesday. Tuesday was quiet. Just family dinner. I cooked that evening. Made my grandmother's famous pot roast, the one Diane always requested for special occasions. The one I'd made dozens of times without ever receiving a compliment. I set the table with the good china. My grandmother's china. The set that had been in the family for generations and that Diane had claimed as her own. I put out flowers from the garden that I'd arranged myself. I even lit candles. Diane noticed when she came downstairs. What's the occasion? No occasion. Just thought we could have a nice family dinner. She looked pleased. Touched, even. That's lovely, Katie. You're so thoughtful. Victoria arrived with Brandon at 6. Richard was working late, which was normal. We sat down to eat and everyone complimented the meal and I served the pot roast and poured the wine and for a few minutes, it almost felt like we were actually a family. Then I pulled out the envelope. I need to talk to you about something, I said, my voice steady. Clear. Strong in a way it hadn't been in months. Can it wait? Diane asked, gesturing at her plate. We're having such a nice dinner. No. It can't wait. Something in my tone made both of them look up. Something that wasn't there before. Confidence. Authority. The quiet power of someone who knows something they don't. I slid the documents across the table to Diane. 18 months ago, you offered me a place to stay when I had nowhere else to go. You told me family takes care of family. And I was grateful. So incredibly grateful that I spent every single day trying to repay that kindness with work. With service. With making myself indispensable. Diane was looking at the documents, her face slowly draining of color. But the thing is, I continued, and my voice got stronger with every word, I wasn't a guest in this house. I was never a guest. This house belongs to me. Has belonged to me for 10 years. That's not possible, Diane said, but her voice was thin. Fragile. It's completely possible. And completely true. My grandmother left me this house in her will. Along with the trust fund that's been paying for every single improvement, every renovation, every property tax payment, every maintenance bill for the past decade. Victoria was reading over her mother's shoulder now, her eyes wide with shock. Mom, what is this? I don't know what this is, Diane said, but her hands were shaking. I'll explain it more clearly, I said. The law firm tried to contact me for years. They sent letters to this address, letters addressed to me, about my inheritance. Letters that someone received and never forwarded to me. Victoria's face went red. Then white. Letters that came to this house, I continued, watching Victoria carefully. Letters that someone signed for and kept hidden. That wasn't me, Diane said quickly. I never received any letters. I turned to Victoria. Did you? She was looking at the documents in her mother's hands, her face a mask of panic. Victoria, I said quietly. Did you? This is insane, she said, standing up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Grandmother left this house to my mother. Obviously. She was the only daughter. She wasn't the beneficiary, I said. I was. I have the will, the deed, the trust documents, the letters from the law firm trying to reach me for 9 years. It's all here, all verified, all legally binding. This is a mistake, Victoria said, her voice rising. This has to be a mistake. It's not a mistake. It's a fact. And it's been a fact for 10 years. The only mistake was that no one told me about it. Diane was staring at the documents now, flipping through them with trembling hands. Her face went through a series of expressions, shock, confusion, anger, and finally something that looked like fear. Katie, she said weakly, let's talk about this rationally. I am being rational. I'm being more rational than you deserve. For 18 months, you've treated me like a servant in my own house. You've given me chore lists. You've introduced me to your friends as charity. You've made me scrub floors and cook meals and do laundry and drive your son around while knowing, or at least suspecting, that this house was supposed to be mine. I didn't know, Diane said, but her voice was weak. I swear I didn't know. Then explain the letters. Explain why the law firm sent correspondence to this address and it was never returned. Explain why you told everyone you inherited this house when you didn't. I thought I inherited it. My mother told me. Diane stopped. Closed her eyes. Opened them. My mother told me I would inherit the house. She said it was going to be mine. And you never questioned why the legal paperwork told a different story? I never saw the paperwork. I trusted my mother. Your mother left the house to me. And the trust fund to me. And someone in this house intercepted letters that were supposed to bring me that information. I turned to Victoria again. Fine, she shouted, slamming her hand on the table hard enough to rattle the dishes. Fine. A letter came. One letter, years ago, right after grandmother died. It was addressed to Katie, but it came here and I opened it because I thought it was estate paperwork. And it was about the inheritance. About Katie getting the house. And I thought it was a mistake. Obviously a mistake. Grandmother would never leave the house to Katie instead of my mother. So I threw it away. The silence that followed was like a vacuum. Sucking all the oxygen out of the room. You threw it away, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You threw away legal documents about my inheritance because you assumed they were wrong. I was 19. I didn't understand what I was doing. You were old enough to know that opening someone else's mail is a crime. You were old enough to know that destroying legal documents is a crime. You were old enough to know that depriving someone of their inheritance is a crime. Katie, Diane started. And you, I turned to Diane, you lived here for 10 years. Used the trust fund for renovations. Spent $40,000 on a new kitchen. $30,000 on a bathroom. You spent my inheritance on customizing my house to your taste. Did you know that money was mine? Diane's face crumpled. I thought it was the family trust. I thought I had access. The trust has one beneficiary. One. Catherine Rose Morrison. It's been that way since my grandmother created it. You never had access. You used it anyway. I didn't know. How did you access the funds if you didn't know? Diane was silent. You knew, I said softly. At some point, you figured it out. And instead of telling me, instead of doing the right thing, you kept spending. You kept living in my house. You kept treating me like I was nothing while enjoying everything that was supposed to be mine. Neither of them spoke. I pulled out the formal document Margaret had prepared. This is official notice that I am claiming ownership of this property. You have 60 days to vacate. Katie, you can't throw us out, Victoria said, and her voice was desperate now. Terrified. We have nowhere to go. You have family, don't you? Richard's parents are wealthy. Your mother has a sister in Connecticut. I'm sure someone will take you in. Family takes care of family, right? You're being cruel, Diane whispered. I'm being boundaried. You just can't tell the difference because you've never had to respect my boundaries before. I stood up. Picked up my plate. Looked around at the dining room that had once been my grandmother's favorite room in the house. I'm going to my room. My room in my house. You have 60 days. I suggest you start packing. I walked out. Behind me, I could hear Victoria and Diane arguing, their voices rising in panic and accusation. Victoria blaming Diane. Diane blaming Victoria. Both of them crying. I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, and sat on the bed. Then I let myself feel it. All of it. The anger. The betrayal. The relief. The power. For 18 months, I'd been invisible. Small. Worthless. Now I owned the house they'd been living in. And they knew it. I should have felt triumphant. Should have felt victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. Over the next few weeks, the household transformed. Not the physical house, that stayed the same. But the emotional atmosphere shifted so dramatically it was like living in a different universe. Diane tried to talk to me multiple times, each conversation more desperate than the last. She'd start with apologies and end with pleas. Katie, I'm sorry. For everything. For the lists, for the treatment, for all of it. I know you're sorry. But sorry doesn't erase 18 months of servitude. What can I do to make it right? Move out. Give me back my house. That would be a start. We're trying to find a place. Victoria's looking at apartments. Hurry up. Victoria avoided me completely. Wouldn't look at me during meals. Wouldn't speak to me. Just glared with a mixture of hatred and terror. Her husband Richard tried to intervene once, calling from his office to tell me I was being vindictive. Katie, I understand you're upset, but throwing family out of their home is extreme. Richard, it's not their home. It's mine. It's always been mine. They've been living here without legal right for 10 years. But they've lived here. They've made it their home. And I've been scrubbing their floors. Does that make me part of the home? You need to think about family. I've been thinking about family for 18 months. Family is all I've thought about. And what I've learned is that family isn't supposed to treat you like staff. He didn't call again. 2 weeks after my revelation, Diane's book club was scheduled to meet at the house. She asked my permission, which was a significant shift from the way she used to simply inform me. "It's my house," I said. "I'll host it." "What?" "Your book club." "I'll host it. As the owner of this home. You can attend as my guest." Her face went through several emotions in rapid succession. Shock. Anger. Humiliation. Fear. "Katie, please don't do this." "Do what?" "Host a gathering in my own home? Why shouldn't I?" "You're trying to humiliate me." "No. I'm being the host of my own house. If that's humiliating for you, maybe you should think about why." The day of the book club, I cleaned the house myself. Not because I had to, but because I wanted it to be perfect. I made coffee and tea from my grandmother's tea set. I bought expensive cookies from the bakery downtown. I set everything up beautifully in the living room. When the women arrived, Diane introduced me with that familiar phrase. "This is my niece Katie. She's been staying with us." I smiled and extended my hand. "Actually, I own this house. Diane and Victoria have been staying with me." The silence was remarkable. One of the women, the sophisticated older lady I'd served coffee to a dozen times without her ever acknowledging my existence, said, "I'm sorry, you own this house?" "I inherited it from my grandmother 10 years ago." "My grandmother Eleanor Morrison." "I'm sure you remember her." "Eleanor was your grandmother?" "She was. And she left me this house, along with a trust fund. Diane has been living here in the interim, but I'm reclaiming my property now." "Oh." The woman looked at Diane with new eyes. "I didn't realize." "It's complicated," Diane said weakly. "Not really," I said pleasantly. "My grandmother left me her house. I'm moving in permanently. Simple as that." The book club meeting was the shortest it had ever been. The women kept looking at me with different expressions now. Not pity. Not dismissal. Respect, maybe. Or at least surprise. After they left, Diane was furious. "That was cruel." "Was it?" "I was just being honest." "You humiliated me in front of my friends. You humiliated yourself by lying to them for 10 years about whose house this is. That's not fair." "You know what's not fair? Being treated like a servant in your own home. That's not fair." 60 days passed. Diane and Victoria packed their things. I watched them carry boxes to rental trucks, watched the house slowly empty of their possessions, their influence, their toxicity. 2 days before they were scheduled to leave, Diane asked to talk to me one last time. We sat in the living room, in the chairs by the fireplace where I used to sit with my grandmother when I was a child. "I know you won't forgive me," Diane said. "I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I'm sorry. Truly sorry." "Okay." "I was jealous. My whole life, my mother favored you. You were the special one. The one she confided in. And when she died and I ended up in the house, I thought finally I had something that proved she loved me too. She did love you. But not the way she loved you. And when you showed up, desperate and broken, part of me enjoyed it. Enjoyed being the one with power. Making you dependent. That's horrible." "I know. I know it is. I turned into someone I didn't recognize. Someone who would exploit a person's vulnerability. You can't undo it." "I know. But I can try to be different going forward." They moved out. The house was quiet for the first time in 10 years. I walked through every room, touching the walls, looking at my grandmother's furniture and art and books. It was mine. All of it. I'm sitting in my grandmother's study now. My study. The room where she used to sit and write letters and read novels and watch the garden through the window. I redecorated the house slowly. Kept my grandmother's style in most rooms but made my own changes in others. The dining room where I used to serve meals to people who didn't appreciate them is now filled with books and plants and comfortable chairs. The kitchen where I spent 18 months cooking for an ungrateful family is now my favorite room. I cook for myself now, and for friends. Real friends who appreciate my food and my company and me. The third floor room where I slept while my family lived my life downstairs is now a guest room. I rarely go up there anymore. It holds too many memories of being small and invisible and grateful for scraps. I host dinner parties now. In my house. My grandmother's china. My grandmother's crystal. My grandmother's love, passed down through a will and a letter and a lifetime of knowing that I was special. If you're watching this and you've ever been made to feel less than you are, I want you to know something. You deserve better. Your worth isn't determined by what you can do for other people. Your value isn't measured by your usefulness. You matter. Even when the people around you can't see it. Especially then. Comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Tell me your story. Let's build a community of people who've been underestimated and came out stronger. Hit that subscribe button for more stories about betrayal, survival, and the sweetest justice of all. Finding out you had the power all along. Hit that like button if you understand what it's like to be invisible until suddenly you're not anymore. They called me their maid. They treated me like I was nothing. They made me scrub my own floors. But I inherited their house. And they never saw it coming.